Who is Cooper Perry, and why should you be paying attention to his recruiting cycle right now in the state of Arizona?
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Thanks as always for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get an update whenever we post new content. You can stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter. You can find me at RichieBrads36 and the podcast as well at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. And we're here to talk some more Arizona State Sun Devils football with a twist. Instead of talking about the current team, instead of talking about what we're going to be looking at in the offseason, anything like that, we are looking at a recruit, and not just a 2024 recruit, not someone who's here now. No, we're looking at a 2025 recruit. And I know that's going to catch some of you off guard, like, Richie, why are we talking about this? Well, let me explain, because there is a lot that is going on with this situation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Cooper Perry. If you are unaware of who Cooper Perry is, let me fill you in. Cooper Perry is a wide receiver over at Notre Dame Preparatory High School in Scottsdale, Arizona. Local kid. Listed as 6'1", 185 on 24/7 Sports, and a consensus 4-star across every outlet you look at. 24/7, Rivals, On 3, all of them. Consensus 4-star. He's been a baller for the last 2 seasons. He's been somebody that has been very closely followed in that time. And he is the number 1 prospect in the state of Arizona. Naturally, when you've got a head coach in Kenny Dillingham, they're going to take a very special interest in a guy like Cooper Perry. But let me tell you more about Cooper Perry. Maybe you are still kind of wondering, why is he such a big deal? Well, again, number 1 recruit in the state of Arizona. He is very, very productive. Over the last 2 seasons alone, he's had almost 2,300 yards and 38 touchdowns as a receiver. He also has 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns. He's Mr. Do-It-All for the team. In his career, he's averaging 15.4 yards per reception, just under 79 yards per game. He's an absolute monster. 46 total touchdowns, people, that including the 3 passing. He is insane. He does a little bit of everything for you. And when you have somebody like that who can just contribute in more ways than one, they become a big weapon for your team. Now that you are aware of who Cooper Perry is, let me explain why Cooper Perry is such a big deal for the Sun Devils right now. So over the last year, little over a year, right, since Kenny Dillingham got hired, we have heard one thing from him consistently over and over and over and over again. Activate the Valley. And what does that mean? Well, it means more than one thing. But one of the biggest things that it meant was to recruit in state. He wants these kids to stay home. And how can you blame him? There's a lot of talented kids that come out of the state of Arizona. I won't put us up with Texas or Florida or Louisiana or any other massive state for college for high school football. But Arizona is no slouch. I think you can safely put them in the top 10. Maybe I'm biased because I've lived here my whole life, but I've seen a lot of good players come out of the state of Arizona. And yet, over the last several years, so many of them leave. Why aren't they staying home? Well, that's what Kenny Dillingham wanted to solve. That's what Kenny Dillingham has been working on since he got here. His first year back, he gets a plethora of transfers, and so many of them former Arizona kids, highlighted by Jake Smith, the wide receiver, and Jacob Conover, the quarterback. Obviously, Conover didn't work out the way we wanted it to, and we've yet to see Jake Smith, but those were both four-star kids in the state of Arizona that left because they just weren't recruited hard enough, if at all. So you bring those guys back, and clearly Kenny Dillingham has a preference on these guys that he's bringing back. Obviously, he's getting the most talented kids, but you have these Arizona kids that maybe are a little bit higher for Kenny Dillingham because he wants to activate the Valley. And now you look at this offseason, and he's brought in a darling in Cole Martin. Cole Martin was, of course, a four-star recruit out of the 2023 class. Played 1 year at Oregon, transfers to Arizona State. He's back home. This is just another big-time example of Kenny Dillingham wanting to activate the Valley, of Kenny Dillingham wanting to really take advantage of a good state, of a place that people have called a sleeping giant for years now. There's way too much potential for Arizona State to continue being an underachieving program. And Kenny Dillingham's trying to wake up that sleeping giant that everyone calls us. And he's doing a great job of bringing these guys back. The next step is not letting them go, period. This is where you see Cole Martin come into play. Or not Cole Martin, Cooper Perry come into play. This is where it becomes so interesting, is now this is your first really big opportunity to flex your ability to keep these guys home and not let them leave the state. There were some pretty quality guys that left the state of Arizona in the 2024 cycle. Like you had Elijah Rushing, although, it was always going to be really difficult to keep him. You had, there were several running backs. There's several other edge rushers. I probably could have had the players in front of me, but I didn't think to do that. But bottom line is there's a whole lot of players that have not ended up, and that's okay. One of the interesting things with so many guys leaving was that Kenny Dillingham said, you can leave for a year and it's always good to come back home. That's good recruiting, but for 2025, now's your chance. And there's a really big opportunity here if you are able to keep Cooper Perry home. We, of course, will talk about that a little later on in the podcast, but this is a big chance here to show that you are ready to activate this Valley, to show that you are ready to seize control of the talent that is here. And Cooper Perry is as talented a player as we've seen in the last several years. He is a hard 4-star right now. I'm not saying he can get to a 5-star level. If he went bonkers this year, he would probably flirt with it, but he is a hard 4-star everywhere you go. Consensus 4-star. This is a super talented player. That's the bottom line here. Someone asks you who Cooper Perry is, now you know who Cooper Perry is. And we're going to talk about how he fits in with the Sun Devils here in just 1 second. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There are just 3 more games in the NFL season this year, and now is the perfect time to get in on that action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app's easy to use, and there's so many different ways you can bet. There's live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I want to bring your guys' attention to the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream on YouTube. It's got all the biggest news, so they're going to keep you up to date on who made it to the AFC Championship, who made it to the NFC Championship game. They're going to keep you up to date with everything that's going on in NCAA basketball, with NCAA football, with all your pro leagues. Check it out 24/7. Put it on while you're eating dinner because I know you're looking for something to watch while you eat. I know I am. Check out Locked On Sports Today. Back into our conversation. Let's take a look at how does Cooper Perry fit with the Sun Devils. Let's get the obvious part out of the way. He is your number one receiver. Definitively, unless Jake Smith were to have another year of eligibility, and of course, Jake Smith turns into a superstar. Elijah Badger, unless he's got another year of eligibility hiding up his sleeve, has got one more year in the tank. And this is a perfect opportunity to advertise how good of a coach Rashad Samples is at the receiver position. They have recruited their you-know-what's off, getting talented players into that room. And it's a loaded room. We've talked about it plenty of times. I highlighted it as one of the biggest strengths of this roster right now because beyond Elijah Badger is Troy O'Mary, is Melquan Stovall, is Jake Smith, is Caleb Black, is Xavier Guillory. There is no shortage here of talented receivers. But by the time that Cooper Perry becomes eligible, Stovall will be gone. O'Mary likely will be gone. Badger should be gone. Jake Smith potentially could be gone. You're potentially looking at a brand new room, depending on eligibility. I can't keep up with it. I don't even try at this point. Like, I just kind of put it out there of like, hey, I don't know. Maybe you know. I don't know. So who knows where we're at with that. What I do know is no matter what, there's going to be a lot of guys who are gone because so many of these guys are seniors or graduate players. There's a very good open opportunity here for Cooper Perry to come into Arizona State and immediately be the number one receiver for this team. And based off of what we've seen just the last 2 years, he feels like a very good option to throw in and start for your team. Cooper Perry is built like a number one receiver. 6'1", 6'2", whatever it is. I've seen 6'2" on Max Preps. I've seen 6'1" on 24/7. We won't know until he goes to the NFL Combine because we all know that in college you get an extra inch or two on your height. Jalen Strong was 6'5" in college. Turns out he was 6'2" in the pros. So he's over 6 foot is the bottom line here. He's got pretty good speed. If you go to Max Preps, you can actually see some of his highlights and some of his tape. And dude's quick. He is little white lightning, if you will. And he can just absolutely tear you up. So he looks the part. And he has the production to not seclude, to solidify himself as a number one receiver. That's perfect. But then you also take a look at how else he fits with the Sun Devils. Well, this would be one of the biggest additions that Kenny Dillingham would have made in his recruiting class, not transfer classes, recruiting classes. So he's made a couple of splashes here. He's got Jason Brown, the running back. He's got Jaden Rashada, the quarterback. He's got Jaden Fortier, the tight end. What's missing? A wide receiver. And for an offensive-minded head coach, you know that he wants to get a number one receiver. So there's another easy fit for you. Is it makes a lot of sense for Kenny Dillingham to want to continue taking his offense to the next level. And if you take a look at the 2025 recruiting cycle as well, the Sun Devils have a couple of players already, the most notable of which is Butter Tollefson. And with Tollefson, he is a 3-ish star quarterback. I've seen him 4-star. Depending on what you're looking at on 24/7, I know that they've got their 2 different rankings. I think his composite ranking is a 3-star, and his overall ranking is a 4-star. It's something like that. But with Michael Tollefson, you are looking at a guy that is potentially the successor for Jaden Rashada, because Rashada will be entering his 3rd year at that point in time, and Tollefson could, in theory, sit for a year. Rashada goes to the pros, and then Tollefson takes over. Well, if Tollefson were to come in I don't think there's any better way to get him introduced to a new program at a collegiate level than to have first of all, a good receiver to throw to, but someone in his class, someone that he can learn the ropes with, not just like on the field, but as a student too. I mean, in theory, these guys could be roommates kind of thing. They could bunk together for the first year, first 2 years, or the entirety of their career at Arizona State. Like, in a world where you get Michael Tollefson, Butter Tollefson, whatever you want to call him, and Cooper Perry in the same class, you are able to start really laying foundation and building this program upon two really bright young future pieces. And then if Jason Brown stays, if Jaden Fortier stays, now you've got a really good young nucleus. You continue working around the offensive line, and lo and behold, you've got a lot of weapons here. And the Sun Devils have done a really good job building up their defense, and Brian Ward's done a good job coordinating, but we're in anticipation of this offense becoming what Kenny Dillingham envisions it to become. Right now, they're doing a good job recruiting guys through the transfer portal, right? They bring in Raleek Brown, the potential superstar running back. That's a huge get for you. They've brought in receivers. We mentioned O'Mary, we mentioned Stovall and Guillory. They are attacking the transfer portal, but we're waiting for them to take that next step in terms of the recruiting prowess. And this is where I think you're going to see a big step taken forward if they are able to land Cooper Perry. And it starts to build everything up for you. And he fits into the program in many different ways. But this is one of the biggest ways, is becoming not just the number one receiver, but becoming the forefront, the guy at the forefront, I should say, of being your Activate the Valley, right? You pair him with Butter Tollefson, you've got your young core. You bring him to Arizona State, you're clearly activating the Valley, and he's just a weapon for you. Kenny Dillingham's recruiting him because obviously he would fit into his system. There's a lot of things that Cooper Perry brings to the table for you in terms of how he fits in as a Sun Devil. But honestly, there's another really big factor that he brings in for you, and it's a potential domino effect that he would bring to this program. We're going to talk about that in just a second. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Let's wrap up this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast talking about a domino effect. Here's what I mean when I say a domino effect. Kenny Dillingham. We've talked about this on this podcast already. Activate the Valley. That's the mantra. That's what we are striving to do as a program, as a university, as a NIL collective. All of that. Activate the Valley. Keep the kids home. Be able to create opportunities for these kids to make a little coin off of their name, image, and likeness. Find a way to build this program up to where you're winning games. Build the rest of your programs up. Basketball starts getting better. Hockey's really good. Volleyball's really good. Your wrestling team's really good. You are able to start building up these programs, especially by keeping these kids home. Here's the interesting thing. If you keep Cooper Perry home, if you do successfully get him to commit to Arizona State and get him to sign his letter of intent and get him to play for the program, here's what it does for you. We'll start with the big domino is Cooper Perry commits. The next domino, Cooper Perry plays for Arizona State. And then after that, this is the domino effect. Kids around the Valley are going to watch Cooper Perry on Saturdays, playing for Arizona State, playing for the hometown team, playing for the guy who grew up in the Valley, who's coaching him, who recruited his you-know-what off to get Cooper Perry to Arizona State. These kids watch. And they go, why not me? And these 3-star kids, these 4-star kids, these 5-star kids that are in the state of Arizona, they see Cooper Perry and they see him have success. And they go, why not me? In fact, Kenny Dillingham said as much to Cooper Perry. He said, you come here, guys will follow. And that is like a oh crap kind of statement. And Cooper Perry said as much. Is like, that kind of took me off guard. Getting this source of the information from Chris Cartman from Sun Devil Source. So definitely shout out to Chris for putting all that together. If you guys are looking for someone to keep you in touch with everything, absolutely recommend you go check out Sun Devil Source for 24/7. Chris Cartman is one of the best in the business. But you have Cooper Perry saying that, and it clearly resonates with him. And then you hear about the things that happened this past weekend. So if you didn't know, Cooper Perry took an unofficial visit to Arizona State this weekend. He is setting up an official visit at some point in time. But those unofficial visits are really cool. In that unofficial business, Kenny Dillingham, as well as, I don't know if it was the whole football team or a big handful of them, went to an ASU hockey game over the weekend. And during that time, the student section found out that Cooper Perry was in attendance. And we are pretty in the loop at this point with the Cooper Perry stuff. If you didn't know, that was the point of this podcast. At least part of the point of the podcast was to introduce you to Cooper Perry. But for those who are in tune with it, when they found out that Cooper Perry was there, you know what they started doing? They chanted his name. They go, Cooper Perry. That's what they start doing. I want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine you're a 17-year-old kid and you're being recruited by one of the state universities in your hometown. You're being recruited by the college that's in your backyard. And you're taking an unofficial visit and you're meeting the coach and you're meeting some of the players and you're meeting positional coaches. You're walking around the university and you get invited to a hockey game for Arizona State, and they're a good team. So you're watching a good team play good hockey. And then all of a sudden, someone finds out you're in the crowd. And these college kids and these guys who are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old guys in college get wind of it and they just start chanting your name. I'm sorry, I'd be starstruck if I was Cooper Perry. I wouldn't even know what to do with myself. Knowing I am a 17, 18-year-old kid and I am a top prospect. I am the number one recruit in the state of Arizona. And my backyard team, the backyard college, is recruiting me. And not only are they recruiting me, but everybody wants me to stay home. That's activating the Valley. Imagine you are him. That is a crazy, crazy concept to even begin to wrap your head around. To get a standing ovation and to get people to chant your name, and you're not LeBron James or you're not Patrick Mahomes, that's got to be otherworldly. But then what does Kenny Dillingham say? He says, if you commit, others will come. That is so evident. It's not just talk. And the reason why you know it's not talk is because of what you saw when you went to a hockey game. You're not even committed to this program. You got an offer on the table. You got an offer on the table from a lot of teams. Oklahoma offered you. Arkansas offered you. U of A offered you. You've got offers. And yet you go to an Arizona State hockey game and everybody knows who you are. And everybody wants you to stay. I can't even begin to imagine. First of all, my ego would be through the roof. But it's insane. This isn't happening 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this isn't happening. Now it's happening. And Kenny Dillingham says, you can be the shining example. You can be the guy. And when people look back at this program, they say, Cooper Perry walked, so name could run. Cooper Perry was part of the change at Arizona State. Cooper Perry could be associated with Kenny Dillingham forever. And if Kenny Dillingham has a damn good career at Arizona State, to be one of the guys that's looked back upon as one of the pioneers of the Kenny Dillingham era, that's powerful. That's powerful stuff. And that'd be really hard to turn down. So for what it's worth, there is quite a big domino effect here. You get Cooper Perry to commit, the number one recruit in the state of Arizona. For what it's worth, also, he is not the only kid at Notre Dame Prep that is highly sought after. His teammate, tackle Logan Powell, is also a really high 3-star. He might be a 4-star on some places. You got two kids in the same school, and like if they're really good friends, maybe they commit together, kind of thing. But that's what Kenny Dillingham's saying is he's like, you commit, people are going to follow you. Maybe your old teammate follows you. Maybe some of the other guys that you're playing against are going to see you commit and they go, I want to go. I want to go to Arizona State. I want to be the hometown hero. What's Kenny Dillingham been saying, man? Be the hometown hero. He said this so many times. The guy who has a car dealership in 20 years and everyone's like, oh, I'm going to go to Cooper Perry Ford dealership. Dude, why not? The kids get your jerseys because you're playing in the pros. And then you retire and you come home and everybody knows your name. Everybody knows your face. Cooper Perry can be one of the guys who gets that started because Kenny Dillingham is getting his feet wet with Arizona recruiting right now. They are doing a really good job getting those transfers to come home. And they're doing a good job introducing themselves. But a guy like Cooper Perry, that's the one. That's the one that sends seismic shockwaves through the state of Arizona in recruiting. That's the one that gets everybody to kind of raise their eyebrows and they're like, oh, hold on. What's going on at Arizona State? That's what Cooper Perry can be. That's what he can be. There is so much weight that this could place on your program in the best way possible. I would love nothing more than for Cooper Perry to commit. Even beyond what he could do for your program, I mean, flat out, this is a really talented player. And if he goes out and balls out again this year, oh my God, it'd be one of the best recruitments that you've done in the last 10 years. He is that kind of level of talent. He's a 4-star going into his senior season. Landing Cooper Perry would be huge in more ways than one. If for no other reason than because he's a good player, but for the biggest reason of what it does for the future of this program. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are trying to stay in touch with everything that's going on with Cooper Perry, I will do my best. But again, you need to check out Chris Cartman and Sun Devil Source on 24/7 Sports. They're all over it. He is in touch with all sorts of people. He's really good at his job. So if you want to stay in touch with that and anything else that he can publicly tell you, go check it out. It's worth the subscription. It is totally worth the subscription. Absolutely check it out. He's going to keep you up to date with everything. But I'll do my best to keep you up to date too. So hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcasts. Follow me on Twitter. You can find me at Richie Bradshaw36. The podcast is there at LO_Sun Devils. But as always, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. We will be back again tomorrow. One more reminder. We are doing 6 days a week now, Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday if we have to pivot or if there's any big news. And we'll be having a Sunday episode as well. That'll be recapping what's going on in basketball. But we got lots of stuff to talk about for the offseason. So make sure that you guys are staying up to date. I'll see you later. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked